Thanks, Julia. I just wanted to start by saying thank you, everyone, for attending today. If you have any questions, like Julia mentioned, please feel free to go ahead and type them in the chat box. I'm happy to answer them as we go along. Today I'm going to be discussing energy efficiency and renewable energy opportunities for greenhouses. What makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Some things make sense more so for a seasonal operator versus a year-round operator, and vice versa. So with that, we will get started today. So a quick overview of what I'll be discussing today. We'll be going over greenhouse energy use and losses, energy efficiency opportunities, renewable energy opportunities. We'll discuss a little bit about different options for funding assistance. We know a lot of folks are interested in doing things, but let's say a new thermal curtain doesn't fall out of the sky for us, so it can be more efficient. And then we'll do a quick recap and some conclusions, and then we'll actually have extra time for some questions and answers. But as I mentioned, feel free to put your questions up as we go along. So quick question for everyone online. True or false, greenhouse energy consumption can be modeled using standard building tools and models? I'll give you a minute just to think about that. And the answer is false. Greenhouses are definitely in a different realm due to the way they're constructed and the materials that we actually use to build them. So trying to use a typical online service modeling tool doesn't usually come out very accurate for a greenhouse. There are some online tools available that are specifically for greenhouses. There's a USDA self-assessment tool online that you can use. There's also other tools such as Virtual Grower, and those are all free, and they give you a more accurate idea of how much energy consumption your greenhouse would be using, depending on what materials it's built out of. And I'm not sure why I'm not moving. So, quick breakdown of energy use in greenhouses. Outside of labor, energy bills are the highest cost for a greenhouse. Up to 80% of that energy use is in heating if you're in a cool climate, and maybe 15% is going to be electricity. Up to 100% could be electricity if you're heating using an electric heat source. But it will vary largely just based on where are you located, what kind of greenhouse you have, what are you growing in it, and all sorts of different things. So where is our energy use? Like I mentioned, we do have a lot of energy going to space heating, especially in warm climates, or in cool climates. Even in warm climates, when our temperatures drop at night, you may be in Southern California and the temperature might be 80 and sunny during the day, but at night drop down to 40 degrees, in which case we're still going to be heating that greenhouse at night. And we've got other climates where maybe we're going to be doing a lot of cooling, which a lot of our energy is to be going to cooling, which is a combination of ventilation. It could be just destratification of air with circulation fans, energy going to fogging and misting. We've got potentially energy use for lighting. Are we using grow lights? Do we have a large outdoor parking lot with big lighting to keep that safe? Refrigeration potentially, depending on the type of operation you have. Pumps and motors for irrigation needs. And then our miscellaneous pumps and motors for other things that are operating, whether they be a soil mixer, automatic planting equipment, anything like that. So we'll discuss a little bit typical areas where there's inefficiencies in greenhouses. When it comes to space heating, there's a lot of places that we can lose heat. We could have an inefficient heating system. Our location of our heating system will affect it. What kind of materials we're using. If we're in a beautiful glass greenhouse, that's probably one of the most inefficient options that we've got. Leaks. Are your doors sealing tightly? Do your louvers close tightly in the winter? Are there gaps around the fans? Those kind of things. Insulation. If you're growing up on benches, you definitely don't need to have the bottom of your greenhouse all just glazing material. You can insulate that bottom foot or two depending on how you're growing. Insulation around the perimeter. And then thermal curtains, of course. Thermal curtains are a great way when you're doing a lot of heating to trap that heat in the greenhouse overnight and have less heat loss. Other areas of inefficiency when we're looking at cooling systems, what kind of shading do we have? Is there any shading? What kind of exhaust fans are we using? Are they 50 years old? Are they 2 years old in high efficiency models? What kind of HAF fans? We do need horizontal airflow fans generally to keep the air moving, to keep it from getting stratifying through the greenhouse. There's higher efficiency, higher motors, horsepower, there's lower horsepower motors, depends on what we actually need for that greenhouse. Were they set up properly and zoned in the right spot? Are we fogging and misting? What kind of pads and fan system setup do we have? And then there's also lighting. Are we using high intensity discharge such as high pressure sodium and metal halide? Are we using LED maybe? What kind of lighting do we have in our storage areas? Is it old T12 and incandescent, or have we moved on and upgraded to new, more efficient lighting opportunities? Refrigeration, there's a lot of places to find inefficiencies. It could be in old motors, evaporator fans with no controls, insulation, leakiness. I don't know how well you can see, but you can look at this door and see they've kind of got it all duct taped on the side. It's not quite straight, so you know there's going to be some leaks and gaps in that. How old are your compressors? Do we have overhead doors in our refrigeration unit? Are they a slow-moving door? Are they a fast door? Are there curtains potentially keeping air in, cold air inside, hot air outside? And our irrigation systems, are we using oversized pumps and motors? Is it a drip system, or are we just spraying water all over and wetting everything down? Do we have water reuse systems set up to save water? And then other miscellaneous pumps and motors. Things like I mentioned earlier with maybe mixing equipment, potting equipment. Do we have pumps that are dual pumps that maybe we can use variable frequency drives on? Air compressors, all those little things start to add up. So a quick discussion of kind of the best practices for all of these different areas where we can be losing efficiency. When we're looking at heating efficiency, we're really talking about, do we have temperature controls? A very simple temperature control system will prevent us from overcooling while we're trying to heat, heating while we're trying to cool, give us the opportunity to set back our temperature at night instead of keeping it at 70 degrees all the time. Plants do okay or do very well actually with a temperature differential. If you're a year-round grower, a lot of times a thermal curtain will make a huge difference. We can lose up to 75% of our heat at night without that thermal curtain. So there's a very large potential for energy savings, especially if you're a very warm greenhouse. Underbench heating, when I mentioned earlier, heating distribution location, underbench root zone type heating systems are always going to be our more efficient opportunities. A lot of plants, you can usually take the overall air temperature down by up to 5 degrees, maybe even 10 degrees, depending on your crop, as long as those roots stay warm. So having that underbench root zone type heating system is going to be more efficient than having overhead units that are pushing air around. We also have got high efficiency heating systems, such as a 93% efficient condensing unit heater, which is going to be much more efficient than our 78% efficient unit heaters that were put in 10 to 15 years ago. High efficiency glazing materials, we really don't want to use single pane glass. Yes, it looks beautiful, but if you're heating, it's the most inefficient option we can to try to keep that heat energy in. We've got much more efficient glazing materials, double polycarbonate, triple wall polycarbonates, acrylics, double poly films, a lot of opportunities out there to give us a beautiful greenhouse still, but with a much more efficient insulation value. And then we've got cooling. So some great ways to save energy with cooling is high efficiency exhaust fans. There are third-party rated energy efficient exhaust fans out there that can help you save some energy, especially if you have those really old fans. If you're looking to upgrade them, make sure you pick one of the high efficiency ones. Natural ventilation could allow you to completely get rid of your exhaust fans by opening up those sidewalls, opening up a ridge vent, and letting the natural airflow go right through. Using high pressure fogging instead of low pressure fogging helps to really cool the plants without saturating and soaking our leaves. Maintaining our pad and fan systems. A lot of times that's something that's easy to overlook. They get cluttered and full of minerals and other things that get deposited and they don't work quite as well as they had in the past. And then, of course, shade systems. A lot of times we can get a thermal curtain that will double as a shade curtain. So getting something in that 55 to 65% shade with a thermal curtain can give you a twofer. Get you heating savings and cooling savings. For lighting, think about rooms that you go into and come out of that people forget to turn off lights, and maybe put in motion sensors or photo eyes. Make sure there's photo eyes on your outside lighting. LED lighting you can use for grow lighting nowadays. You can use it for your regular store, your outside lighting, and you'll save a lot of energy compared to high-intensity discharge, incandescent, linear fluorescence, up to 75% energy savings. And then on refrigeration systems, we can look at EC motors, which is an electronically communicated motor, evaporator fan controls. Both of those are very low-cost items that can save quite a bit of money if you're using that refrigeration system at least 6 months of the year. The payback is usually 5 years or less. Strip curtains that would hang across that walk-in cooler door, or that door that's an overhead door, try to keep the heat out, cool air in. High-speed doors. If you've got a door that your hand putting up and down or moves as slow as a typical garage door, they do have high-speed doors that open up very quickly and close very quickly to try to keep that cool air in. On your refrigeration system, scroll-type compressors are more efficient by 20% or so over a reciprocating compressor. And then refrigeration heat recovery. When I say refrigeration heat recovery, we're looking at taking the waste heat off of that compressor and preheating water. So if you've got any sort of hot water heating needs, it's a great way to decrease your water heating needs and actually save your compressor and make it last longer by taking that waste heat right off of it. So for miscellaneous pumps and motors, we want to make sure our air compressors don't have any leaks. If you're hearing that it's leaking, get those leaks fixed. Make sure you're turning it off between uses. Put a variable frequency drive on some of those motors, especially if you've got dual pumps for something and you know that sometimes you need full capacity and sometimes you don't. Putting a variable frequency drive on one of those will allow you to utilize it just to what you need it and yet have full capacity when you do need that full capacity. And premium efficiency NEMA 3-phase motors. A lot of folks may have 3-phase motors, but if they're 20, 30, 40 years old and they fail, it's definitely time to consider going to those premium efficiency motors that are higher than our standard high efficiency motors and reap those savings. On irrigation, the most efficient use of our motors and our pumps on irrigation systems, as well as our water use, is going to be using a drip irrigation type system. And there's also another opportunity that I just recently found out about called AquaMat, and I'm sure there's multiple folks now producing this, but it's actually a way to put the water right underneath and let the water suck up through the roots, kind of like a self-watering system. So a little more detail on our energy efficient heating options. We've got all sorts of different things. We've got biomass systems, we've got boilers, we've got unit heaters. I will discuss biomass systems a little bit later when we go into the renewable energy portion. Oh, sorry, I'm a little ahead of myself. So boilers, we want to make sure that we are having them maintained every year, make sure that they're running at optimal efficiency. If they're a very old boiler, keep in mind that there are Energy Star rated boilers that are on demand high efficiency that are in the 96% efficiency rating. And if you're heating year round, it's an excellent opportunity if you've got that root zone heating. We do want to consider high efficiency unit heaters. Typical unit heater, the old school kind, maybe 20, 25 years ago, is going to be a gravity vent unit heater. We lose a lot of heat right out that flue because there's nothing closing it off. Those actually are not made anymore. We are now at the point where the least efficient unit heater you can buy new is going to be a power vented unit heater, which will automatically damper off that flue when there's no heat being produced and no exhaust that needs to be released. It keeps the heat in the building. But we can go above that. Those are about 78% efficient, up to 93% or so efficient with a condensing unit heater. Again, with this AquaMat or AquaTherm mat, they give us an opportunity to irrigate and heat at the same time. It's a root zone heating option with water flow through it so that the plant can continue to suck up water as needed instead of having water evaporating in the greenhouse or non-drip type system, overwatering potential plants and overwetting our leaves depending on the crop we're growing. Air temperature reductions by up to 15 degrees. Again, we're keeping those roots warm and heated, and decreased water use by about 25%. So our unit heaters, as I've already mentioned, they're easy to install. That's why so many of us use them. Low cost, easy install, but make sure we're picking the high efficiency models like the Affinity or any other manufacturer that's got these high efficiency models. And you really want to look at not just the overall efficiency that they're being rated at, but what is the seasonal efficiency? The seasonal efficiency is going to take into account heat loss because of burning up water that's in there from condensate and other things like that. So you really want to look at the SEER, S-E-E-R, efficiency of the unit heater and see how high of one you can find that's going to make sense for your greenhouse. So here's our efficiency. We've got our thermal efficiency of a gravity vented unit heater. It might say 80%, but the reality is when you look at the seasonal efficiency, it's only about 65%, which is a significant waste of energy if you know that those numbers are the way they are, versus we can go up to the high efficiency condensing unit heaters with a thermal efficiency of 93% and the seasonal efficiency of 91%. So let's move on to cooling here. And the question is, do I need cooling? Well, probably need some kind of cooling. If you're in a climate that, say, gets up to 90 or 95 degrees in the summer, inside your greenhouse could very well get up to 140 degrees or hotter if we have no way to cool it and let that heat out. That's going to cause plants to die, and that's the last thing we want as a grower. We want our plants to be healthy and vital and to sell. When we're looking at our opportunities for energy efficiency in our cooling systems, our most efficient option is going to be use natural ventilation. That means ridge vents, side vents, roll-up sidewalls, all those kinds of things. We're looking at mechanical ventilation because our greenhouse is structured and set up that the houses don't allow us to have enough space around them maybe for natural ventilation, or we're in an area that doesn't have enough wind flow to get us enough for natural ventilation. We're looking at fans, louvers, making sure we use a shade cloth, a fan and pad system, a fogging system potentially, and misting systems. With natural ventilation, your best bet is to make sure you've got at least sidewalls that open up. With the natural ventilation system, we can get, it's 95 degrees, say, outside, you know, temperatures that are within 10 to 15 degrees of our outside temperature. But again, this is going to vary depending on where our greenhouse is, how it's set up, how close is it to other greenhouses, what kind of airflow and wind do we have that day. It works really well in mild climates. It works really well with space between our greenhouses, so there's enough room for that air to circulate around. And it's going to depend on how heat tolerant are your crops. So natural ventilation is going to rely on pressure differences. It's going to allow cool air, moving air to come in from the sides and go all the way across. If we've got a ridge vent, it's going to allow that hot air to chimney right out the top. They can be controlled mechanically with automation, or you can save money by doing it manually. The biggest key is making sure there's space outside those greenhouses so we get that airflow so it can really move the air through that greenhouse as the wind is blowing. We want to use mechanical cooling because we're not in an area that natural ventilation will work, or we need to really cool our crops because they're not very heat tolerant or whatever reason you may have. We've got some options, fans and louvers, where we're putting an exhaust fan on one side of the building and a louver on the other end to open up and pull that air through to get fresh air going through the building. Fans with pads. Again, we'll have our pads on one side of the building with water coming through, exhaust fans on the end, pulling that cooled air right through the building, potentially adding fogging systems or misting systems to try to add some moisture to the air and help it feel cooler. if we're looking at using fans and louvers, we can probably get the inside temperature of the greenhouse within 10 degrees of outside temperature. We're trying to get a specific amount of air moving through the greenhouse, though, to reach that temperature differential between inside and outside. And that's generally going to require 1 air volume per minute change. A way to do this more efficiently is to get multi-speed fans or use variable frequency drives, making sure our louvers are functioning well, protected from weather, and that intake louver is going to have to be bigger than our exhaust fans so we can get enough airflow through that whole building. So your best bet is to make sure that when you're doing this, you're working with somebody who understands greenhouse and greenhouse design and can help make sure you're going to get enough airflow based on your louver size and the fan that you select to pull that air through. Again, using fans and louvers instead of natural ventilation is going to give us more control over how much air is coming through. Pick your fans based on a high efficiency fan rating. AMCA, Best Labs are both third-party test facilities that will be able to let you know, here's a list of fans that are high efficiency versus ones that aren't very efficient, using those VFDs, and then making sure we're maintaining fan belts, louvers, are they opening easily, are they closing tightly in the winter months. Now, if we include a shade cloth with our fan and louver system, we can actually bring that temperature down further, maybe within 3 degrees of our outdoor temperature. So if you need it to maintain something similar to outside, this could be a very cost-effective way. Again, that shade cloth can also double as your thermal curtain in the winter months. You can make it so that they're automatically controlled with controls, sensors, things like that, or manual controls. And it's something that when you look at your greenhouse and think, oh, that's never going to work in here, keep in mind that equipment dealers and installers are very, very clever and usually can find a way to get a thermal curtain or a shade cloth to work in your greenhouse. Have them come out, have them look at it and see if it's possible or not, and don't just brush it off and say, yeah, that won't work here, because a lot of times there is a way to make it work. They can design it to work in just about any style greenhouse. So when we're looking at using fans and evaporative pads, those swamp cooling type systems, we can actually cool our temperature inside the greenhouse to make it cooler than outdoor temperature. It's a form of evaporative cooling, so as that water gets pumped through and pours down those pads, we're cooling the air as the air is pulled from one side to the other and all the way through the greenhouse. Hot air gets dumped out, cool air pulled all the way through. And the efficiency of this, as well as using our fans and louvers, can be greatly improved if we put that shade cloth in. So to further increase our cooling opportunities, we can use sprinklers, misting systems, fogging systems. It's going to truly actually cool and humidify the air. And it's very uniform if it's placed right and it's installed properly versus a pad and fan, which may start out very cool on the end where the pads are and be pretty warm by the time you get across a 100-foot building where the exhaust fans are. Excuse me. It aids in the temperature-humidity balance, and it can be used with or without mechanical ventilation. So this does not require us to put in a pad and fan system. It doesn't require pads and louvers. It's truly going to be able to cool, and it's going to cost a little bit less if we don't need that extra equipment to run. So if we look at doing a low-pressure fog or mist system, a lot of times people find that they may need a water purification system because we end up getting clogs from impurities depending on where your water is coming from. It's a lot of wetting of our foliage. And we all know, being a grower, we don't want our water or our plants to be soaking wet all the time. We don't want that mineral residue left on our crops. So if we get something more in the high pressure and we get a smaller particle size, we'll get more even distribution. We'll get less likely soaking of our plants, which is a good thing, and better cooling. So high pressure fogging gives us a very, very, very small water droplet. It evaporates into the air rather than soaking our plants. we can get temperature reductions of up to 25 degrees with a high-pressure system compared to our outdoor temperature. Humidity is very consistent throughout our greenhouse, and it's going to give us cooling efficiency about 28% higher than using a high or a low-pressure system. So another option to look at if you're considering using a cooling system outside of a fan and pad or a fan and louver type system. Another thing we want to make sure we always put into a greenhouse is going to be automated temperature controls. They can be used for checking on humidity and cooling needs, heating needs. They can be very easy, 1 or 2 settings. They can be very, very complex where you can now control it from your computer sitting in your house. It can monitor weather activity. If we know suddenly it's going to rain, close up those natural ventilation sidewalls, all sorts of different things. Paybacks on these systems, if we go with a lower cost model, can be down to 2 years. Crazy for to not have one in your greenhouse in this day and age with so many options and so many low cost opportunities. And automatically knowing I'm not heating and cooling at the same time, bad weather is coming, I can know that I need to get out there and close those sidewalls, close that brick fence up. For refrigeration, and I realize not everybody's got refrigeration at their greenhouse, what some people do, we may have it for storing produce, we might have it for floral products, all sorts of different things. But when you're purchasing it, let's account for the cost to operate it, not just the initial cost. Because if the initial cost is only slightly higher, but our overall operation cost is significantly lower, it's going to be worth it to put that extra money into the higher efficiency system. If you're looking at replacing a system 20 years old or older, high efficiency units can save you 25% or more of your operation costs. And if you're using those year-round, that can be a significant amount of your electricity bills. The biggest thing you want to look at is how insulated is it? What kind of door do I have? Is it tightly sealing? All those little things. And make sure that when you're talking to the person you're purchasing your equipment from, you tell them exactly what you're looking for and let them know you want something that's very high efficiency. Make sure that you have your regular maintenance done on it. Your compressors should be looked at. They should be cleaned. You should make sure that, we've got electronically communicated motors, evaporator fan controls. Both of those should be put in together in a combination. They're a low project cost, fast payback, as low as 6 months I've seen. So doing something like that could be a very fast payback, very good energy savings. But keep in mind, putting in controls without the electronically communicated motors isn't going to save you any money. The motors need to be able to communicate with those controls. So if you have existing motors that are old and you put in controls, you're not going to save anything. The motors need to be able to talk to those control systems, so you'll have to upgrade both. You can just put in EC motors and save energy, but you can't just put in controls without the motors. One more thing for refrigeration energy savings that I had mentioned earlier is refrigeration heat recovery. We see this used in a lot of industrial and dairy type operations where they need a lot of hot water. And if you're using root zone heating, you're using a lot of hot water. Instead of letting that compressor overwork itself, we can pull that waste heat off, run it through a heat exchanger, and get preheated water. Water temperatures can get anywhere from 110 up to 130 degrees in our heat exchanger. That might be all you need for your hot water heating system. Or it might need a little extra boost, but that's a lot of potential energy savings. Paybacks can be down as low as less than 2.5 years on these types of systems. So that concludes our discussion of energy efficiency. Just a brief overview of some ideas for folks. Now we're going to move on to a quick discussion of renewable energy opportunities in greenhouse. And again, as we go, please feel free to throw up any questions that you have. I'll be happy to answer them as we go along. So we're going to discuss just a little bit about solar thermal, combined heat and power, ground source heat pump or geothermal type systems, solar electric, and then biomass as well. So we'll start with solar thermal. As we all know, having a greenhouse is a solar thermal system. It's collecting passive solar heat, heating our greenhouse for us. We can actually utilize additional passive solar thermal systems to try to store and use at night when we don't have that sun shining and giving us the free heat. This can be done using water, stones, concrete, phase change materials, all sorts of things that would allow us to collect that heat and then let it release during the nighttime hours. We also can use an active solar thermal system, which could be something that would be perfect for anyone doing root zone heating systems. We're going to collect heat with our panels, simple traditional solar thermal panels, transfer the heat to the water system, boost that water temperature as needed, and then go ahead and circulate that through. Now there is some potential issues with, depending on how big your greenhouse is, with enough storage capacity, and things like that. So you're really going to want somebody who can truly design your system for your specific needs, depending on how much heat you need for your house, before you go ahead and just install something like this. But it is a great opportunity, especially for anyone with hydronic heating systems or root zone heating systems. Here's just a map to give you an idea of what kind of solar opportunity there is for solar thermal. This specifically looks at concentrating solar thermal, so actually kicking up our potential solar thermal resource. You can see the colder climates that we get to, we get those shorter days, therefore we get a little bit less heating opportunity. Those warmer climates with the longer days, we're going to get more solar thermal opportunity. But when I say concentrated solar thermal, I'm not talking about using our flat panels anymore. Now I'm talking about using something like the ARC system or the AgriLab parabolic trough, where we're taking that solar, we're concentrating it, which is going to superheat our fluid, either water or antifreeze or some type of fluid that's running through our system, and instead of maybe getting us 120-degree water, it's going to kick that up to maybe 150 or 160-degree water. So higher temperatures by far, which may mean you could completely eliminate your traditional water heating system, although make sure you've got something on backup in case you have a lot of cloudy days. Great, again, for hydronic heating. These are a couple photos just to give you an idea of some different things that they've got out there. Talk to your equipment dealers, see what else is available, and kind of start pricing things out. Moving on to combined heat and power. What we're doing is with combined heat and power is we're taking some sort of fuel gas, whether it be propane or natural gas or something like that, and we're going to run it through a genset to create our own electricity. From that creation of electricity, we have a lot of waste heat. We can take that waste heat and use it for our space heating needs. We also get condensate water that's wasted, and if it's clean or can be cleaned, it can be used for watering in our greenhouse. And we've also got exhaust gases, which are carbon dioxide. We all know plants love extra carbon dioxide. You can scrub that waste gas and run it through your greenhouse to increase our carbon dioxide. And then the excess electricity that we don't need for running our lights, pumps, motors, things like that, usually you can sell back to the grid. But that's something you're definitely going to want to talk to your electric utility about to see what kind of a net metering agreement they have in these types of systems. So it's going to be more cost-effective on this type of system for a larger facility than a smaller facility. You may need to, like I say, negotiate your net metering rate if you're going to put in a very large system that's using a lot more, creating a lot more electricity than you actually need to use. And make sure your system is strategically sized for your needs. Let's make sure we're being as efficient as possible and then sizing it exactly for what we're going to need rather than just putting that in and saying this is a great idea. Those systems can get very expensive. Just a quick diagram of how these systems work. You've got your gas coming into your genset, creates electricity, and goes out. We can use it, like I said, lighting, pumps, motors. We've got waste heat coming off. We've got hot water we can pull off of it. And all of these things can eventually come back and get circulated to our greenhouse. So we're offsetting, if you're already purchasing extra carbon dioxide to put in your greenhouse, you can remove that system. You can get rid of most of your water heating system, if not all of it, because this one system can pretty much provide just about everything you need for your system. Now keep in mind this isn't 100% renewable energy. We still have to purchase true energy, whether it be propane or natural gas or something like that, to create all of our other things. But being able to take one form of energy and turn it into many other needed energy things for our greenhouse can make this a very appealing option. So for geothermal, there's a lot of different types of systems out there. All different types of temperature needs can be met. We've got air systems, water systems, closed loop and open loop systems. An idea of how these work is on the right, where you can see we've got these closed loop systems containing our water or antifreeze. It goes down into the ground in the traditional geothermal, circulates through, pulls that cool or hot air, and then pipes it up. So if it's summer and we need to cool, we're taking our warm air, piping it, pushing it down into the ground, pulling out the cold air that's in the ground for cooling, and in the winter we're taking that cold air, pushing it down, and taking that reserved warm air that's down there and piping it up to warm the greenhouse. So there are benefits definitely of using a geothermal system. We have decreased energy costs, all depending on the type of fuel you're using and the cost of your fuel. It's reliable for very low heating needs. If you're trying to warm a tropical greenhouse, this might not be the best opportunity for you. Generally, it's going to use electricity that's off-peak because we're going to want to pull that heat in during the nighttime hours. We're getting all of our preheating from the sun, or most of it from the sun during the daytime hours. And it's generally very easily retrofitted if you're using a root zone or hydronic heating system of some sort. But now, what's something we really need to think about with these systems? It does require heat pumping and dumping. In a true geothermal system, we need to put heat back in the ground at some point or put cool back in the ground at some point. You could end up otherwise with a cold zone if all you do is full heat, full heat, full heat. And if you're going to try to do it that way, you're likely going to need a very large horizontal field or very many deep wells. And if anyone ever had to drill a well, you'll know that can get very expensive to drill a lot of wells. So one of the questions people ask all the time, is this really considered renewable energy? Yes and no. It's definitely pulling a source of heat and cooling from the ground, which we can keep and maintain, but we do need electricity to actually pump and get that through. So while we may be using natural gas right now for our heating, we'll be going to renewable energy source, but we need electricity to get to that, access to that source. So similar to combined heat and power, we're still using some sort of a traditional fossil fuel energy to get access to other energy. But it can be a cost saver, and it is more renewable than using 100% fossil fuel. A little bit of discussion on our solar electric. Systems these days can be sized to meet just about any load. You can make them small, you can make them large. When I started working with solar electric 8 years ago, we used to price these systems at $7.50 to $8 per watt installed. Nowadays, you can get them for maybe $2.50 per watt installed. So the cost has come down significantly over the years. They are very easily scaled to go larger or smaller. You can start with a small system and add on to them to make them larger as you have the funding or you see your needs increase. A lot of times these systems aren't necessarily going to offset 100% of our load, but they can be used to offset a significant amount depending on your sizing. And the best use for this in a greenhouse is really lighting, pumps, motors, fans, and things like that. And I do have a little video to show you, just kind of give you an idea of how we can use PV in greenhouse operation. So here is a greenhouse that's using a solar panel to operate their natural ventilation system. As it gets warmer out, this panel continues to roll up. The panel is also being used to operate their louvers at the ends of the greenhouse. So it slows down. As we time-lapse, we can see it opening our fans and louvers, battery backup in there so that we know it will continue to operate even if the sun goes away. So just a nice little way that you can say you're using renewable energy being as efficient as possible. You've gotten rid of those fans already, or naturally ventilating, and now we don't even need electric to open those curtains up and open those louvers. So that was a thank you from Matt Crum at Alternate Energy or Advancing Alternatives. He sent that video to me to give everybody an idea of how we can use PV in a greenhouse at a low-cost option rather than putting up a giant system. All right, so now we'll move on to biomass. Biomass is by far our most popular option for energy efficient or for renewable energy in greenhouses. Works very, very well if you're using hydronic heating of some sort, root zone heating systems. And we're not just talking using big logs of wood. This can be a compost heat reclamation system. This can be using cherry pits. It can be using corn. It can be pellets. There's all sorts of different biomass options. What's the advantage of biomass? Well, depending on our fuel costs, it could be very large savings in our fuel costs. It is considered carbon neutral. It is a very sustainable source of fuel if you're finding that you're purchasing it through somebody who's very careful and watches how they're cropping their biomass source. And potentially there's long-term contracting available to save you money and get that contract in place for multiple years. The disadvantages of biomass is the large, bulky amount of material you will need to store. We purchase electricity, we purchase natural gas. We don't have to store that on site. So it's a very small footprint on our site. But now, knowing you're going to heat year-round or all winter long, that's a lot of potential material you need somewhere to store on your site. To watch the moisture content depending on the source you want to use. If you're using green wood, we're going to decrease the efficiency of our system. Drier options will give us a higher efficiency in our system and allow us to have less fuel on site. Think about the cost of shipping weight. Transportation costs can get very expensive. It's definitely overall a lower efficiency than using natural gas or propane or things like that, and it could spontaneously combust. So think about where you're storing it and how you're storing it. The last thing you need is to watch it go up in flames in the corner before your heating season actually kicks in. And you got to watch your particle size. If you're using something with a hopper, make sure you're getting a consistent particle size so it flows through your hopper the way you need it to. And then we also have potential, depending on where it's stored on site, for odor if it starts to compost on itself and break down, dust and debris getting blown around if it's outside, might make the neighbors a little unhappy, and then runoff. If it's outside and you get a lot of rain, there's going to be leachate and runoff coming out of those stored biomass materials. So something just to keep in mind. Other things to consider is how long-term is your supply? Is it reliable? You don't want to get a system set up and have a one-year contract and then find, uh-oh, that guy went out of business. Now where am I going to find my cherry pits? Or where am I going to find this specific type of pellet that I've been using? What kind of pricing is it now? Can they give me long-term pricing? Or is it going to be every 6 months potentially changing and getting expensive? How good is my fuel? How dry is my fuel? Who's going to manage it? When we purchase natural gas, it just shows up. We purchase propane, somebody shows on a regular basis and fills that tank. Now having a pile of biomass of some sort, somebody needs to move it, haul it, fill the hopper, whatever you're doing with it. There's going to be labor involved and someone needs to manage that, make sure there's enough for the whole heating season, and if we're running low, pay attention and get that ordered. How is it getting from our stack to the combustion chamber? Again, that's more labor costs to think about. What kind of combustion chamber do I have? Does it have a big hopper? Am I throwing big logs into it? Does it last me 2 or 3 days? Do I have to continue to stoke it? Also, health and safety considerations. Where is my actual burner unit? Make sure it's away from potential customers, animals and critters, and that whoever is dealing with the unit understands that this is a unit burning things. There is fire, it gets very, very hot. And they should understand how it operates and all the safety precautions there is needed to operate this unit. So what impacts are there on the environment? Are there any? What are we doing with our waste? There's going to be leftover ash and garbage that we're going to have to get rid of from the unit. Where can we take it? What can we do with it? So that wraps up our renewable energy, just a little soundbite so you guys have an idea of what the opportunities are out there, what's the potential. Just a quick discussion on potential opportunities for funding. Yes, it would be wonderful for everybody to have a 55 to 65% thermal curtain that we could all put up, but let's face it, if I have a large greenhouse, $20,000 is not falling out of the sky for me to just put this up. There are programs out there that are available. Check with your utility, check with your state, see if there's a renewable energy or energy efficiency program, any of those. Look at USDA REAP. The Rural Energy for America program does have incentives or grants and loans available for energy efficiency and renewable energy opportunities. Stop at your local farm service center, talk to them, see what's available. REAP can cover up to 25% cost share on these projects. The NRCS EQIP program now offers payments if you sign up and apply to do an energy audit. Find out where are my opportunities, what is the biggest bang for my buck. That audit can then also be used to go through the EQIP program to apply for incentives or payments on those recommendations. So go and talk to your local farm service agency, talk to your NRCS and USDA reps, find out who qualifies, what's available, because if you can get cost share to make the payback better, it's a great thing to have out there, a great opportunity to take advantage of. All of the incentives can typically be found on the DesireUSA.org website. They're very good at keeping it updated. If you're in Wisconsin, it will tell you all about Focus on Energy. It'll tell you all about the USDA and the NRCS programs. If you're in Illinois, it'll probably tell you all about your local utility programs and things that are available. So get on there and check it out. You can even tell the website specifically you're only interested in energy efficiency state programs or energy efficiency and federal programs or renewable energy federal programs. And it'll give you all the details. They're updated, like I said, very regularly, so it has very good recent information. So let's wrap this up as we're getting towards the end of our time, and I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. Start with energy efficiency. The more efficient you are, the tighter your greenhouse is, the less a renewable energy system is going to cost you. And that's going to give you your biggest bang for your buck. High efficiency equipment is readily available. Ask. Feel free to call me if you have questions. Talk to your local equipment dealers. Talk to your local utility rep, whoever it is that can give you information. A lot of associations out there also have excellent information on what's available and what makes sense. There are renewable energy options for large, for small. Most of them can be sized accordingly. And make sure you take advantage of those grants and rebates and incentive payments that are available. Look into them before you purchase and you install your equipment and you do your project. Dig into it a little bit. Look into, is there a way I can get an energy audit done to make sure that what you think is a great idea really will have a reasonable payback. Because to install a very high efficiency boiler, thinking yours is not very efficient, and then find out yours was doing pretty darn good, and your payback of 5 years is really a payback of 12 years, that's not what we want to see. A lot of utilities, state programs, NRCS EQIP, there's opportunities to help with funding to get that audit done. Make sure you take advantage of those things. Okay, so I will open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to shout them out, put them in the chat box. This webinar, like Julia mentioned, will be available. We are recording it, so we will send out the link to folks. You can also always shoot me an email or give me a call if you've got additional questions after this. But now I'll open it up, and feel free to send us any questions you have. And thank you all for taking the time to join me today and listen in. Hopefully it was educational and informative. And again, it was not meant to be specific and very detailed, just an overall overview of efficiency and renewable energy for greenhouses. Well, it doesn't look like we've got any questions coming in. So again, I will thank everyone for joining us today. Feel free to contact me if you do think of any questions. Like I said, we will have this webinar available on the website. Julia will send out a link to everybody, and thank you all for your time.